Happy Homebrew Wednesday, everybody. This is Rev up near Seattle. Homebrew Wednesday for April 15th, 2015. It's tax day, also the first day of the Stanley Cup playoffs. This week, I'm doing a little comparison of a couple of dry stouts. I'm about a month after the fact as far as doing my specific tastings, since St. Patrick's Day was almost a month ago. That's right, I do have 2 dry stouts on tap at my house. Dry stout's kind of my favorite session beer. My friends give me a hard time because stout's like my lawnmower beer. But anyway, my usual recipe is pretty much a traditional dry stout in the kind of in the model of Guinness. But this year I decided to do 2. And I have one, the one that I usually brew, and then I thought that I would do one that was more along the lines of stout in a different city from Cork, Beamish, especially kind of the more traditional recipe before they were bought out, at least according to the description by the famous Michael Jackson. So I thought today we'd do a little taste test and comparison of the 2 recipes. I've got them both pouring on stout. I think a few weeks ago on my Homebrew Wednesday, I featured my first pull on my stout setup. So I'll start with my traditional, my standby go-to recipe. That's for kind of more in the line of Guinness dry stout, if you like that. It works well to bottle it. It works well in the keg, and it's pretty much spot on nitro as well. Any one of those 3 ways of serving it up, it's a winner of a recipe. So I call it Sláinte Mhaith, which in Gaelic means good health. It's kind of a traditional toast. The recipe is pretty much 70% pale malt. I use Maris Otter. 20% flaked barley, and that's going to give it kind of the mouthfeel and a little bit of body considering the low gravity. I always shoot for under 5%. I usually come in between 4 and 4.5% on my ABV. And then the last ingredient, 10% black barley or roast barley. No black patent, just roast barley. Now, 10% is not a lot of your grist, but what I do is I actually pulverize it. I grind it up in a coffee grinder, grind it up to a really fine powder, and then I just add it to the top of my mash, stir it in, and even though most beer software, if it's got a color scale, is going to show that particular 70-20-10% ratio recipes coming out too light, you can see it comes out nice and black, and I'll bring it up to the camera here in a minute. But if you grind it into a powder and put it in there, you have no problem with the color. That's kind of the traditional recipe. Dublin style, Guinness style stout. Now, my family is from the Cork region of Ireland, and that happens to be where the Beamish brewery is. Beamish has a little bit different take, very similar as far as low gravity, mouthfeel, and a lot similar flavors, but the recipe is slightly different. Again, I went back and was using references, some Michael Jackson references, reading his description of the grist and the flavors that he got to inspire me. I don't know if it's a clone. We can't even get Beamish in this country anymore. And not only that, but I think the recipe has changed since they were bought out by a big brewery. But as far as the recipe goes for my Beamish clone, which I call Taoiseach, which is the kind of the, I don't know, Taoiseach is kind of like the big dude, the head honcho. So I call it Taoiseach Corky. It's so it's kind of like the Cork head honcho. Anyway, same base malt, 70% pale malt. That's also Gaelic, by the way, that Taoiseach stuff. Anyway, 70% pale malt, and the same 10% as far as the roast barley, the black barley. Same treatment. Pulverize it to a powder, mix that in there to get your color. The other 20% is slightly different. Okay, instead of the flaked barley in the Dublin style and kind of the Guinness style dry stout, instead of that, it's a combination of wheat malt, malted wheat. So that's going to give the same kind of mouthfeel and a little bit of the body that the flake barley gives you, the wheat will, and then a little bit of chocolate malt. And I don't know, I don't have the recipe right in front of me, but I think it's probably close to, if it's 70% base malt, pretty close to 15% wheat, about 5% chocolate. It might be 10 and 10. You can mess around with it if you wanted more chocolate. You can do a 10% wheat, 10% chocolate balance on that. I use the dark chocolate in there. And then, again, like I said, the 10% roast barley. So I'll bring it right up to the camera so you can see the head is starting to fall a little bit off the nitro, but you can kind of get a look at the color of the head and the color of the beer. So that one is my Sláinte Mhaith. That's kind of the Dublin style, you know, modeled after Guinness dry stout. And that one is the Cork style. It's got a little bit, for whatever reason, it looks like there's a little bit more lacing on the glass on that one. I don't know if that's the weed or it's the glassware or what, but you can kind of see the color on the head and the color of the beer there. Best of my Gaelic's not really super, but to the best of my knowledge, anytime that I've, you know, been in the old Irish pub in Ireland, they just, you can order it in English obviously, but I hear the old guys calling it just black beer, so I don't know. I don't know if that's 100% accurate or not. So I'll start with the one. This is my go-to. All right. So the head is kind of tannish color, so there's some color to it. It's nice deep black. If you hold it up to the light, it does have, you know, around the edges. If you get a nice bright light, there's some nice ruby highlights in there. This is, you know, brilliantly clear. It's well conditioned at this point. Pretty much what you'd expect, the low carbonation, little bit of the flake barley, a little bit slippery, kind of soft mouthfeel, but not real thin, not as thin as you'd expect for a really low gravity ale. You know, it's pretty much what you expect from a Guinness. Pretty roasty, coffee. Slightly a little bit of astringency, and just finishes nice and dry. Moving on to the kind of the Beamish clone by Taoiseach. This one has a little bit of a, I spoke about soft in the mouthfeel. The mouthfeel is very similar. This one might be a little bit thinner in the mouthfeel, but the flavors are a little bit softer. So where my Guinness style one, very prominently roasty and astringent, that roastiness is a little more subtle in my my Beamish clone. Well, Beamish clone. It's not really clone. My Beamish inspired one, and it's kind of got a balance between that coffee roast, and it's a little bit chocolatey. And you know, again, you know, if you're familiar with chocolatey and beer, it's not like chocolatey like a Hershey bar. It's more chocolatey like dark chocolate, like kind of the burnt chocolate around the edge of the brownie kind of thing. It's a little more dark and it's not sweet necessarily. Chocolatey, not in your face milk chocolate. I'm not sure which one I prefer actually. I mean, I mentioned earlier this is my go-to, my Sláinte Mhaith, my dry stout. I've won awards with it. And it's pretty much my go-to my go-to beer. So when I mean, as far as a stout, an Irish-style dry stout, but this one has nice. There's a little bit more breadth to the flavors on that one. Like I said, it's a little bit softer. It's not quite as in-your-face roasty, and the balance between that chocolatey note around the edge and the roast is pretty nice. It would be if this one had the same mouthfeel as that one. If it was a little bit more full in the mouthfeel, this would be perfect. Pretty good. As far as the bittering, I pretty much shoot for, I believe, again, I'm not looking at the recipes, but off the top of my head, and if I'm wrong, I'll make a correction note in on the video. But I pretty much shoot for about 45 IBUs in there, or whatever, 45 bittering units, since I can't really measure IBUs, but 45 bittering units. Usually, in my traditional recipe for my Sláinte Mhaith, the Guinness style dry stout, it's 45 units right at the 60-minute mark. All at 60 minutes, all the bittering charge and nothing else in it. But kind of the recipe that I came up with for the Beamish style stout, Michael Jackson had mentioned a little bit about perhaps there were some hops, some late edition hops in it to add a little bit of character to the beer. So I added a few IBUs at the end. I got most of my bittering units at the start at the 60 minutes, and then I made about I can't remember how many units I got out of it. Probably somewhere between 5 and 10 units, maybe 5 units at the end. In the last 10 to 15 minutes of the boil, I threw those in the kettle. So because I knew I was going to compare the two, because I knew I was going to be pouring them side by side, I adjusted my usual bittering regimen on my traditional recipe. So instead of having it all in the 60-minute charge, I kind of broke it apart in a similar manner and was trying to shoot for the same number of bittering units from the 60-minute hops in both recipes, and the same number of bittering units from those late addition kind of character, what would normally be aroma hops. But when you smell these, there's virtually no hop aroma. Very malty, roasty, maybe just a little bit of kind of earthy hops, maybe a little bit of earthiness from those English hops, but definitely dominated by the roasty aromas, and same thing in the flavor. So anyway, that's my comparison. Maybe I'll put a note at the bottom of my video with the specific recipes for you guys, but you should be able to decipher it use whatever English style hops you want. I'm pretty sure that I used either it was all East Kent Goldings, or there might have been a combination of East Kent Goldings with a little bit of Fuggle mixed in there. Use whatever. I mean, really, if you're putting it mostly in there at the 60 minutes, it's not going to matter anyway. And even those that go in there at the 15 minutes, there's just going to be a real subtle character. If you use English, you're good to go on that, because really what you're shooting for is kind of the real roasty, especially on the Dublin style dry stout, the Guinness style, where it's the all barley, with that roast barley character and the flake barley, and a little bit of chocolate character in that Cork style, the Beamish style. Both these recipes are winners. I will probably, this is the first time I brewed the Beamish style. I've always been like the Dublin style guy, but I really like the way this one turned out. Not enough to replace my old standby, but it's enough different that I'll probably brew this more often. I'll probably brew it and add it to my rotation. I tend to always have at least one dark beer on. My favorite style is really porter, and then dry Irish stout kind of is a really close second on there, so I always tend to have one or the other. Sometimes, if I'm lucky, I've got both on there. But anyway, so that's my review of a couple of my homebrew recipes. Just a quick tasting here on Homebrew Wednesday for April 15th. Again, I'm Rev up near Seattle. Drink well. Sláinte.